is another old English tale. This one is called The Master and His Pupil. There was once a very learned man in the North Country who knew all the languages under the sun, and who was acquainted with all the mysteries of creation. He had one big book bound in black calf and clasped with iron, and with iron corners, and chained to a table which was made fast to the floor. And when he read out of this book, he unlocked it with an iron key, and none but he read from it. For it contained all the secrets of the spiritual world. It told how many angels there were in heaven, and how they marched in their ranks and sang in their choirs, and what were their several functions, and what was the name of each great angel of might. And it told of the demons, how many of them there were, and what were their several powers, and their labors and their names, and how they might be summoned, and how tasks might be imposed on them, and how they might be chained to be as slaves to man. Now the master had a pupil who was but a foolish lad, and he acted as servant to the great master. But never was he suffered to look into the black book, hardly to enter the private room. One day the master was out, and then the lad, as curious as could be, hurried to the chamber where his master kept his wondrous apparatus for changing copper into gold and lead into silver. And where was his mirror in which he could see all that was passing in the world? And where was the shell which, when held to the ear, whispered all the words that were being spoken by anyone the master desired to know about? The lad tried in vain with the crucibles to turn copper and lead into gold and silver. He looked long and vainly into the mirror. Smoke and clouds passed over it, but he saw nothing plain, and the shell to his ear produced only indistinct murmurings, like the breaking of distant seas on an unknown shore. "I can do nothing," he said, "as I don't know the right words to utter, and they are locked up in yon book." He looked around, and see, the book was unfastened. The master had forgotten to lock it before he went out. The boy rushed to it and unclosed the volume. It was written with red and black ink, and much of it he could not understand, but he put his finger on a line and spelled it through. At once the room was darkened, and the house trembled. A clap of thunder rolled through the passage and the old room, and there stood before him a horrible, horrible form, breathing fire and with eyes like burning lamps. It was the demon Beelzebub, whom he had called up to serve him. "Set me a task," said he, with a voice like the roaring of an iron furnace. The boy only trembled, and his hair stood up. "Set me a task, or I shall strangle thee." But the lad could not speak. Then the evil spirit stepped towards him, and putting forth his hands, touched his throat. The fingers burned his flesh. "Set me a task." "Water yon flower," cried the boy in despair, pointing to a geranium which stood in a pot on the floor. Instantly the spirit left the room, but in another instant he returned with a barrel on his back, and poured its contents over the flower, and again he went and came, and poured more and more water till the floor of the room was ankle deep. "Enough, enough!" gasped the lad, but the demon heeded him not. The lad didn't know the words by which to send him away, and still he fetched water. It rose to the boy's knees, and still more water was poured. It mounted to his waist, and Beelzebub still kept on bringing barrels full. It rose to his armpits, and he scrambled to the tabletop, and now the water in the room stood up to the window and washed against the glass, and swirled around his feet on the table. It still rose. It reached his breast. In vain he cried. The evil spirit would not be dismissed, and to this day he would have been pouring water, and would have drowned all Yorkshire. But the master remembered on his journey that he had not locked his book, and therefore returned, and at the moment when the water was bubbling about the pupil's chin, rushed into the room and spoke the words which cast Beelzebub back into his fiery home. Here is another old, short English tale. This one is called Titty Mouse and Tatty Mouse. Titty Mouse and Tatty Mouse both lived in a house. Titty Mouse went a-leasing, and Tatty Mouse went a-leasing. So they both went a-leasing. Titty Mouse leased an ear of corn, and Tatty Mouse leased an ear of corn. So they both leased an ear of corn. Titty Mouse made a pudding, and Tatty Mouse made a pudding. So they both made a pudding. And Tatty Mouse put her pudding in the pot to boil. But when Titty went to put hers in, the pot tumbled over and scalded her to death. Then Tatty sat down and wept. Then a three-legged stool said, "Tatty, why do you weep?" "Titty's dead," said Tatty, "and so I weep." "Then," said the stool, "I'll hop." So the stool hopped. Then a broom in the corner of the room said, "Stool, why do you hop?" "Oh," said the stool, "Titty's dead, and Tatty weeps, and so I hop." "Then," said the broom, "I'll sweep." So the broom began to sweep. "Then," said the door, "Broom, why do you sweep?" "Oh," said the broom, "Titty's dead, and Tatty weeps, and the stool hops, and so I sweep." "Then," said the door, "I'll jar." So the door jarred. "Then," said the window, "Door, why do you jar?" "Oh," said the door, "Titty's dead, and Tatty weeps, and the stool hops, and the broom sweeps, and so I jar." "Then," said the window, "I'll creak." So the window creaked. Now there was an old form outside the house, and when the window creaked, the form said, "Window, why do you creak?" "Oh," said the window, "Titty's dead, and Tatty weeps, and the stool hops, and the broom sweeps, the door jars, and so I creak." "Then," said the old form, "I'll run round the house." Then the old form ran round the house. Now there was a fine large walnut tree growing by the cottage, and the tree said to the form, "Form, why do you run round the house?" "Oh," said the form, "Titty's dead, and Tatty weeps, and the stool hops, and the broom sweeps, the door jars, and the window creaks, and so I run round the house." "Then," said the walnut tree, "I'll shed my leaves." So the walnut tree shed all its beautiful green leaves. Now there was a little bird perched on one of the boughs of the tree, and when all the leaves fell, it said, "Walnut tree, why do you shed your leaves?" "Oh," said the tree, "Titty's dead, and Tatty weeps, the stool hops, and the broom sweeps, the door jars, and the window creaks, the old form runs round the house, and so I shed my leaves." "Then," said the little bird, "I'll moult all my feathers." So he moulted all his pretty feathers. Now there was a little girl walking below, carrying a jug of milk for her brothers and sisters' supper. And when she saw the poor little bird moult all its feathers, she said, "Little bird, why do you moult all your feathers?" "Oh," said the little bird, "Titty's dead, and Tatty weeps, the stool hops, and the broom sweeps, the door jars, and the window creaks, the old form runs round the house, the walnut tree sheds its leaves, and so I moult all my feathers." "Then," said the little girl, "I'll spill the milk." So she dropped the pitcher and spilt the milk. Now there was an old man just by on top of a ladder, thatching a rick, and when he saw the little girl spill the milk, he said, "Little girl, what do you mean by spilling the milk? Your little brothers and sisters must go without their supper." Then said the little girl, "Titty's dead, and Tatty weeps, the stool hops, and the broom sweeps, the door jars, and the window creaks, the old form runs round the house, the walnut tree sheds all its leaves, the little bird moults all its feathers, and so I spill the milk." "Oh," said the old man, "then I'll tumble off the ladder and break my neck." So he tumbled off the ladder and broke his neck, and when the old man broke his neck, the great walnut tree fell down with a crash and upset the old form and house, and the house falling knocked the window out, and the window knocked the door down, and the door upset the broom, and the broom upset the stool, and poor little Tatty Mouse was buried beneath the ruins.